Hey there, my name is Alex, I am the Silver Mont, and this is a starter guide for Genshin Impact. Specifically, I'll be talking about the PC version of the game, but almost all of the information herein should apply to other platforms as well. This is not a sponsored video, and there are time codes on screen now if you want to jump to a specific segment. With that out of the way, let's get started. As you play through the story, open chests in the world, and complete challenges, you'll get Adventure EXP. This is separate from Character EXP. Increasing your adventure rank serves primarily to increase your world level. As your world level increases, enemies will grow stronger, new chests will spawn, and enemies will drop better equipment. Once you hit Adventure rank 45, at time of writing, current highest tier of equipment will be available to you. For example, enemies at Adventure rank 1 might only drop grey items, whereas at 45 they have a chance to drop the grey, green, blue, purple, and even golden legendary version of that item. Therefore, there's virtually no reason not to increase your world level. Yes, enemies will grow stronger as well, but as long as you've been enhancing your characters correctly, that won't be an issue. Increasing your adventure rank also unlocks items from the Adventurers Guild, and sometimes world level increases will be automatic. Other times they will require you to go through a dungeon first. In general, it isn't something you specifically need to grind for, it will happen naturally. Certain aspects of the game are also locked behind adventure rank, such as the ability to play cooperatively with other players, locked behind adventure rank 16 I believe. Features such as the Battle Pass, Genshin's version of a Season Pass, will unlock at adventure rank 20. Increasing the strength of your character is done primarily in 3 ways: improving their weapons, leveling them up, and enhancing their constellations and talents. I have listed those also roughly in order of priority or effectiveness. That is to say, you will see the largest gains in most cases by having the best weapon you can. Another benefit to enhancing your weapons is that you can swap a weapon to any character, so if you get a better character later on, you can swap your already upgraded weapon to them, as long as that character uses the same weapon class, of course. When it comes to weapons, there is Enhancement and Refinement. With Enhancement, you will feed other weapons and ore into your weapon to increase its level. Every now and then you will need to ascend the weapon too, such as when it hits level 40 you will need to ascend it before you can level it up again to level 41 and so forth. Ascension typically requires materials obtained from domains. Refinement is when you feed the same weapon into itself. If you have a duplicate weapon, you can refine it by combining them, and increasing the power of the weapon's trait. Generally speaking, weapon enhancement is the best thing to go for first when it comes to increasing a character's strength. Leveling them up is naturally good as well, especially for electro characters, as their electric attacks scale from their level. You can kill enemies to get experience, but it's currently so minuscule that relying on that to level up would take an eternity. The best way to increase your character's level is to feed them EXP books that you'll find in the world. So is it better to try and level up everyone, or just one character at a time? I would argue the latter. Considering how the game's combat and elements work, their damage is generally calculated from the character triggering the elemental detonation. For example, if character A is level 50 and character B is level 1, character B applies water to an enemy, then character A applies electric, triggering the elemental reaction. The damage will be scaled from the character who triggered it, in this case character A. This is true for most of the elements in the game, so I believe your best bet is to level up your strongest character primarily, focus on getting that character up, the one who will be triggering the elements, your main DPS. The other characters, your support, well, they'll be languishing behind somewhat until they can catch up. If you don't have any good characters, then just stick with the Traveler. You can't go wrong with leveling up the main character, as they are very powerful and will only get stronger as the story progresses. As with weapons, ascension must be done now and then for characters, and the materials for this will largely be found from enemies and world bosses. As for constellations, for everyone who isn't the main character, if you pull a duplicate of them from the Gacha system, you can feed that duplicate into them to unlock more of their constellation, much like weapon refinement in a way. Each character has 6 constellations, so in total you would need to draw a character 6 times to max them out. Obviously, unless you're spending money on the game, this will probably not be feasible, or it will take a very, very long time to do, and you'd have to rely on a lot of luck as well. Finally, there's talents. This straight up increases the power of your character's various abilities, such as their auto attack, their ultimate ability, their elemental ability, and all that stuff. Which you should focus on first depends on the character, of course. For example, the main character, the Traveler. I feel like their swirl ability is probably the best thing to focus on, but if you have a strong auto attacker, then increasing the power of their auto attack might make sense as your priority. Look at your character, look at what attack feels like your strongest one, and focus on making that even stronger. I would argue that's the best way to go about it. Genshin's combat is simple at first glance. You have a basic auto attack chain for every character. You can hold down the attack button for an alternate attack. You can activate a plunging attack if you are high enough in the air. Every character has an ability and a super ability known as elemental bursts. You can dodge using the stamina bar that you'll be increasing by finding collectibles in the world and feeding them to shrines. And the dodge in Genshin has relatively generous iframes, that is to say, invincibility frames. In other words, when you start a dodge, you'll be invincible for a short period of time, so you can dodge into an attack with the right timing and take 0 damage. Ranged characters can fire their bow in a combo or charge it up. Generally, charging up a bow will infuse that arrow with an element. There's no real mana system in the game, so feel free to use your abilities whenever they are off cooldown, as these are where most of your damage will come from, as your abilities are imbued with elements, and elements are big damage. And how do elements work in Genshin? Effectively, they combo off of each other. You apply one element to an enemy, then the second element will trigger a reaction. For example, if you set an enemy on fire, they will take a little damage over time, sure, but then if you use wind on that same enemy, it will spread the fire to other enemies. This is where most of the big damage comes from in Genshin, so it's in your interest to combine elements on the regular and find out what works for you. Wind is unique amongst the elements in that it triggers swirl. It spreads whatever element is currently applied to an enemy and applies it to other nearby enemies. It goes without saying, wind is therefore not too useful by itself. Geo is similar to wind in that it is neutral. It neutralizes the element it combined with and makes a crystal that you can pick up to shield yourself with that particular element. Electro charges enemies, giving a chance to interrupt their actions, and it can chain between wet enemies nearby. If you combine it with fire, you'll trigger overload, which explodes in an area, whereas combining with ice triggers superconduct, lowering their defense. If you're fighting an electro enemy, ice or fire seem to be the best ones to use on them. Most electro triggers seem to scale with the character's level rather than other stats, making it a little unique in that aspect. Hydro makes enemies wet. Who would have thought? Wet enemies are then susceptible to electro and ice. Hitting a wet enemy with cryo can freeze them. Once frozen, you can shatter them with a geo attack or a greatsword strike, or a plunging attack. Whereas combining hydro with fire causes vaporize, high fire damage. If you are fighting a water-based enemy, try using electro or cryo against their shields. Pyro burns enemies over time. Combining it with cryo causes melt, high fire damage. Fire can also be used to easily burn grass and structures, which of course means that if you combine it with wind, you're able to spread that fire quickly and easily around a large area. If you're fighting a fire-based enemy, try water against them. I would say fire is one of the best elements, although that's largely a personal preference, as I find it extremely useful in a variety of situations. Unfortunately, I have no good fire characters at time of writing. Cryo slows enemies down and can, as mentioned, freeze wet targets. You can also use cryo to freeze water, allowing you to traverse bodies of water with ease, compared to swimming that drains your stamina rapidly. If you're fighting a cryo-based enemy, of course, you bring fire and melt them. Now, if you're wondering, what are the best elements to have in a team? This will of course vary depending on what characters you have, as well as personal preference and balance with the game. Now, my personal opinion is the best 4 elements to combine are fire, ice, water, and wind. But again, that's just my opinion. There are quite a few currencies in Genshin, so let's cover them quickly. Mora is your basic gold currency, used to buy items from shops and so on. You'll also need to spend it when leveling up characters and weapons. You'll receive quite a lot just from playing the game, but the best way to acquire it, specifically, not including events that pop up now and then, would be Blossoms of Wealth that spawn in the world. They cost 20 resin a pop to open after defeating a wave of enemies and award you a bunch of gold. Now, of course, these blossoms will increase the quality and quantity of the rewards as your world level increases. Then we have resin itself. If you've played other gacha games, you might be familiar with their stamina systems. Resin is Genshin's version of stamina. Resin replenishes in real time, 1 unit of resin every 8 real-world minutes. There's a cap currently of 160 resin. Once you hit that cap, you will stop regenerating. Resin is used to open blossoms in the world. These spawn a wave of enemies. You defeat them, you spend resin to acquire the treasure. Mora from wealth, EXP books from revelation. Domains also cost 20 resin to collect the treasure at the end, whereas world bosses cost 40 resin and weekly bosses cost 60 resin. If you're wondering what the most efficient use of your resin is prior to adventure rank 45, you'll want to spend the majority of it on blossoms to ensure you have lots of EXP books and if needs be money, and now and then domains or bosses to ascend your character. You'll also want to spend 120 resin a week fighting the weekly bosses, 60 for each boss at time of writing, as they drop some useful items and are good for the battle pass too. In-game events will typically involve resin, so when an event is active, spending resin on the event is probably the best use for it. Then we have primogems, whatever. These are what you use to draw or pull characters and weapons in the game's gacha system. You acquire these by doing story quests, daily quests, opening chests, just about everything. You can buy them with real money, indirectly, by purchasing Genesis crystals. Genesis crystals convert into primogems at a 1-to-1 ratio, so 1,000 Genesis crystals will become 1,000 primogems. It costs 160 primogems to do a single draw on any of the gacha systems. Finally, there's Masterless Stardust and Masterless Star Glitter. When you pull on the gacha system, you will acquire Stardust. This can be used in the in-game shop to buy various things, such as materials. If you pull a 4-star character or weapon, or higher, like a 5-star, that you already have, then you'll get Star Glitter. This can be used to buy slightly more powerful items from the shop, including characters. The shop itself cycles and restocks monthly. It is important to point out that Genshin is a gacha game, but you do not need the best characters and weapons to clear content. You can beat the entire game, with the possible exception of the Abyss Spiral's higher floors, with the base characters, never paying a single cent. That said, let's run through the gacha system. You have Acquaint Fates and Intertwined Fates. These will be obtained here and there throughout the game, but primarily you buy them with primogems, 160 primogems for 1 fate. Acquaints are used on the standard banner, whereas Intertwined are used on the special banners. Whilst this might change now and then, typically you will find 3 banners in Genshin: a character banner, a weapon banner, and the standard banner. The character banner usually means there will be rate ups on specific characters, meaning there's a higher chance of getting them. If you do 10 pulls, you will always get a 4-star within those 10. These can be 10 individual pulls or 10 pulls all at once. Likewise, you will always receive a 5-star within 90 pulls. Once you hit 75 pulls without a 5-star, the rate up starts to increase from base 0.5% exponentially until it hits 100% on the 90th pull. So, should you pull individually or 10 at a time? At the end of the day, it virtually makes 0 difference. I use my Acquaint Fates as soon as I get them on the standard banner. Whereas with Intertwined Fates, I use 10 at a time until 70, and then I begin to do individual pulls. But I want to clarify again that there seems to be no distinct advantage to either method. You can track how many pulls you have in the history and count out how many there are, how close you are to your guaranteed 5-star on your 90th pull. Now, on a character banner, once you get to your 5-star pull, let's say you've done 89 pulls without a 5-star, your next one is guaranteed to be a 5-star. There's a 50% chance it will be the featured 5-star character on that banner. If you don't get that character, your next 5-star will definitely be that character. In other words, if you start a banner with 0 pulls, and yes, they do carry over, so if you're on 89 pulls without a 5-star, the banner changes, your next pull will be a 5-star on the new banner. But you would need a maximum of 180 pulls, that's 28,800 primogems, to confirm that banner's featured character. The standard banner, meanwhile, has no rate ups, and the weapon banner is, for weapons. Generally, I would say it's better to spend primogems on the character banner with Intertwined Fate. So if you want to spend your primogems, buy Intertwined Fate, spend it on the character banner. I would argue that's the best use of them, but at the end of the day, it really does depend what you want to get from the gacha system. If you are looking to spend a little money on the game, I would suggest the Blessing of the Welkin Moon in the shop. This is around $5, of course it will change depending on what country you are in and what currency you use, but it will get you 2,700 primogems spread over a month, 90 primogems a day when you log in. But if you miss a day, you won't get those lost primogems, so you need to make sure you hop on at least once a day to do that. For the sake of comparison, buying 2,240 primogems via Genesis crystals costs $30, so it's a lot more economic, even if you don't get them all at once. Meanwhile, the Spiral Abyss, a sort of challenge mode which eventually will require you to have 2 teams of heroes, awards something like 600 primogems for beating the last few floors alone, which are reset twice a month, I think. Although this is the end game content, it's definitely the hardest thing in the game. You can do the earlier floors of the Abyss Spiral, which are relatively easy, and those are reward primogems as well, but it's a one-time thing. And of course, quests will reward you primogems, events will get you primogems. But for the most part, yes, it will take a long time, or a lot of luck to get good stuff, or a lot of money. But that about does it for Genshin Impact. I didn't cover everything like crafting and cooking, as I feel like those are fairly self-explanatory, but I would say send your characters out on expeditions once you unlock those, grab those crystals and metal chunks, and then turn those into weapon upgrade materials. But yes, please do share your own tips in the comments, or if you have any questions I didn't cover in the video, maybe about crafting or cooking, please do ask them down below, and I'll get back to you ASAP. Until next time, thank you so much for watching, and take care. Ciao.